evening, everyone. My name is Erica Olson, and I'm the Chargé d'Affaires for the United States in Australia. For those of you who don't know diplomatic French, that means acting ambassador. And I'm really happy to be welcoming you today to the first of a series of three webinars on the U.S. university experience. To start out with just a little bit of housekeeping, this session will be about an hour and a half. The first hour will be presentation, and then the last half an hour will be open for Q&A. We have our Education USA teams with us today, both from New Zealand and Australia. And I welcome all of those from across New Zealand and Australia who are joining us here today. We're also really lucky to have two long-term partners of Mission Australia and Mission New Zealand with us today. Dr. Chenelle Goyen, who is the Associate Director of Admissions at the University of Georgia, a position she's had for 15 years. She was an elite junior tennis player and is a dual South African and U.S. citizen. In her role at the University of Georgia, she shapes the future of the university through admissions decisions and is a recognized expert in the international student-athlete transition process. We also have Kaye-Lani Laughna, who is the Director of International Admissions and Financial Aid at Davidson College. She's actually joining us today from China, where she is on a recruiting trip. So it's fabulous to have her with us. She's been in that position for 13 years and is also a well-recognized scholar athlete on her own as a Division I swimmer at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. Something that she will be celebrating when she's inducted into their Athletic Hall of Fame later this year in June. I want to start by saying you all have done probably the most difficult thing when you think about the U.S. pathway, and that is making the decision to jump on and learn more. I'm absolutely biased, but I think the U.S. university system is so unique and fabulous, both the education you get, but also the incredible experience that students have learning and playing sports together in the United States. I actually have my own personal story related to this. I'm the mother of three, and I live here in Canberra. I'm on my way back right now from the Australian Youth Championship water polo tournament in Brisbane. And my daughter is going to start in August at Indiana University in Bloomington, where she will play water polo. So I've gone through this recruitment process on my own. I know how daunting it can be, and I also know how absolutely invaluable the work that Education USA does in helping athletes, students, parents, coaches understand the process. And learn more about how, especially from across the Pacific, you can put yourself on the radar for coaches, and you can go through that process of deciding what's the best match for you. It's really easy, I think, early on to get excited by the sports piece, and it is a fabulous and really important thing. But remember, this is a place you'll live for 4 years. You want to make sure it's the right fit, both academically as well as athletically. So it's a really exciting time for you all as you start to explore this pathway. For any parents on the line, what I'll say is if you haven't already, get really good at taking video. I had a whole second career after work, taking those videos, putting them together, helping my daughter reach out to coaches and learn more about programs. So I want to say thank you all so much for joining us today. It is fabulous to be with you. And with that, I want to make sure that we open it up to our two speakers who have a fabulous background and are here to give you invaluable insights into how you tackle that admissions process in the United States, both from the University of Georgia, which is a large NCAA Division I school, and from Davidson, which is a smaller liberal arts school. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Samantha at Education USA to get us started. Thank you so much.
So yeah, well, welcome you guys, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I actually, being an international student athlete, this is a personal journey that I'm going to use a lot of my own personal stories within this presentation. But yeah, international student athletes hits the sweet spot for me. Being from South Africa and playing tennis in the US and now working in admissions for over 15 years is something that I really cherish. And I actually research the way culture influences the motivation for athletic and academic success at Division I schools in the SEC. So if you have questions related to any of the SEC schools at the end, please feel free to fire away with those. But yeah, I'm going to start us off here with the first few slides. So looking at some 2024 SEVIS numbers, I specifically like to look at SEVIS numbers because these numbers are directly connected to a student's I-20, right? So if you're a true international student, these numbers are going to be most accurate. So I like to always start out with a 30,000-foot view to give students an idea of who are you competing with or against. So for example, coming out of South Africa, we only have 29 universities in South Africa, where the US has over 4,000. So I had no idea what I was up against in this journey of finding the right fit. So it's important for you to kind of understand the numbers a little bit to then see where your fit is within that. So looking at Australia's numbers, there's a little over 6,000 students there. New Zealand at a little over 2,000 students. And this was again from the 2024 SEVIS records. These records are fluid because these students either, they graduate or they drop out to go pro. I work with a lot of these students directly in our office. So I do the Olympic sport recruitment for the University of Georgia. So that means I work with all the head coaches and I get direct access to these students to kind of talk about the admissions process. And just a fun little plug here. So Stephanie Ratliff is an Australian who won the 2024 NCAA Outdoor Championships in hammer throw. She actually attended UGA, and I remember actually working her through the admissions process and working with the coaches. So that's a nice, fun story, and it's always nice to see these folks featured on some of the NCAA brochures. But yeah, going on into the next slide. So international student numbers in the USA, I think it's important for students to kind of start thinking about, all right, so coming out of South Africa, we don't have a lot of people that go to the US. We don't have a lot of universities in South Africa. So it was important for me to kind of understand the entire sphere. So last year, there was a little over 1 million international students that came to study in the US. Approximately 1,300 to 1,500 of those students are from Australia and New Zealand and are competing athletes in NCAAs. So if you hone it in from over 1 million that's studying there, these are the actual numbers of students that were athletes and not just students. So while the precise total of these athletic associations, so with NCAA, NAIA, junior colleges, and so forth, isn't tracked in a single combined report with NCAA, but we know that Australia currently is one of the top 5 source countries for international students to the US. A lot of times I get a question from students and parents where they ask, so what's the number 1 sending country? It's not South Africa. It is Canada. So yeah, right above us is where we get a lot of our student athletes as well. So I'm going to go into our next slide here. So basketball participation. So basketball is the most popular sport for these students, with record-breaking numbers coming in, especially from Australia as well as New Zealand. So if you hone down even more into these numbers, so now we know a little over 1,200, between 1,500 500 Australians actually come to the US and are international student athletes. Now we go into specific sports. So Australia had 187 basketball players. Men was 68, women was 119, and I'll talk about that 119 number here in a second. But yeah, it is important to kind of notice that discretionary and description of those specific numbers. But with Australians' growth, there's currently 1,303 Australian athletes competing in NCAA alone. So outside of basketball, there's been a noticeable increase of Australian football, where these students are coming over and taking the punting roles for our American gridiron football teams. And the University of Georgia had a punter on our team from Australia last year. So it is a popular space that I've seen a lot of these students use their skill set that's transferable into a US-based sport. Beyond that, the top sports is tennis, soccer, swimming and diving, and then, of course, water polo. And so going into this next slide, I'm going to hand this off to Kaye-Lani.
Great. Thank you, Chenelle. And so understanding the parallel shift, right? Chenelle has kind of outlined where are these students coming from, Australia, New Zealand, what sports. As you think about your sport, as you think about competing at the highest level possible in the United States, you also have to remember too that your academics are equally as important. You're looking at schools that often have very high academic bars, and they're going to be holding those same academic bars, their scholar athletes. So thinking about while these might be two separate processes where you're first with talking to the coaches and you're thinking about your position on that team. Do your times line up if you are a stopwatch sport? Do you have all those videos that were mentioned in the very beginning, kind of outlining how are you getting in touch with the coaches, right? But you need to also be paying attention to your academics throughout high school, because when we go and look at your academics, it's for all of high school, not just a final exit exam, not just for the entry exam you would take for university, but really looking at all of those. And because you're on the Southern Hemisphere in Australia and New Zealand, there could be this seasonal flip that could be a unique challenge or an opportunity. At Davidson College, currently on our women's basketball team, we have 3 students from Australia on the team, and on our men's team, we have 1 scholar athlete from New Zealand. Many of those have chosen to start with us mid-year in January, so they actually start with us and they stay for 4.5 years. This way they can have 1 year with the team, practice time, they get to know the team, the coaches, they transition to the US style of education, and then they start their 4 years in the fall, what we call the fall in September. So it's an opportunity. It also could be a challenge, but many coaches, because of the number of scholar athletes coming from Australia and New Zealand, many athletes are very familiar with this kind of calendar gap and this academic piece that might be seen either as kind of unique planning challenges or truly an opportunity as well. So really thinking about this 18 to 24 months in advance. When you get to your final year of high school, if that's when you start thinking about contacting coaches, their rosters are usually full. So you need to be thinking about this 18 to 24 months before you're going to finish high school, secondary school, thinking about how to get in touch with coaches. Are there age limits in terms of when you can get in touch with coaches? So really using that NCAA guide, which we'll get into more on that second and third session, this is kind of just giving you the framework for being a student athlete, being a scholar athlete who's looking from Australia, New Zealand to come to the US. So first, knowing that there are 2 processes, right? 2 parts to it. You've got your talent in sport, but then you also have to make sure your academics are on track as well. You can't just focus on one or the other. It's a parallel process for coming to the US and playing a sport. The next slide goes into that a little bit, kind of building this foundation, right? It's kind of thinking about what is that foundation? It's being honest with yourself. It's talking to your coach. It's talking to others who may have made that jump from Australia, New Zealand, across the Pacific to the US, and being honest with yourself. Very small percentage of student athletes actually make the leap from high school sports, from club sports in their teenage years, to then participating in the NCAA or participating in being either a scholarship athlete or someone who's playing for their college or university. So thinking about what are these academic standards, what are the athletic standards? As I mentioned before, stopwatch sports, you can easily get on and look at the times if you're in track or if you're in swimming, kind of looking at the different times. Do you align with those times? Making sure you take into account for swimming, is it meters or is it yards? So really making sure you're looking at, the times of current swimmers. You can go to some of the meets that they've participated in recently, because coaches, especially at the Division I, especially at high level schools, are inundated with emails, intro emails, right? So really being realistic and having doing that preparation work before. So when you do contact the coaches, you have your times outlined, or you have those videos, you have your portal set up, you have everything. So thinking you're making it easier for the coach. The more back and forth you have to go on emails, the harder it is to get the coach's attention. So really just being honest with yourself and thinking about, what is my talent level? What is my, academic profile, and kind of what are my goals for these 4 years? I'm leaving my home country. What are my goals in going to the United States? And what will my limits be? Is it one of the different divisions within the NCAA? What kind of position will you play when you are on that team? And so kind of just being really honest about the whole process. In this next piece, right, so we have holistic review. Many colleges in the United States, like Chenelle mentioned, there are over 4,000. So different sizes. That means different number of overall applications each college or university will review. That means they might take more time. That might mean they don't have as much time to be reading every essay, every recommendation letter. But we're looking for more than just your overall grade average, and we're looking for more than what you want to study in the United States. So we are looking for how will you contribute to our campus community, whether that's through sport, it's through leadership skills. So we're looking at your character as well. We're kind of looking at the academic profile, the mission of our college or university, kind of your goals, who you are as a human being. These factors come into play in the United States. And it does come into play as well when you're talking to the coaches. They're going to want to know, who are you as a team member? Are you positive? Are you encouraging? They're going to be looking for these attributes just as much as your talent level as well. So thinking about kind of that holistic review is how we review you as an applicant, as a scholar athlete who will be likely to make a contribution to our campus. And then international transcripts. In our offices, we are experienced in reviewing international transcripts from all around the world. We look at your Australian, New Zealand secondary school documents. We also look at those final exams that you take at the end of your high school time, kind of your high school finishing exams, high school exit exams, really thinking about how do those grades match up to your entire high school performance. What are some of the subjects that you took? Did you take some of the most challenging subjects available to you, depending on what's offered in your high school? So really looking for that challenge, academic challenge, because if you're looking at a school like University of Georgia or a Davidson College, we both have very high academic standards as well as athletic standards. So we're looking for students who we know can balance both, that you can find a good balance between your athletic contributions, your athletic commitments and academic commitments, right? And then there's a pre-read. So the pre-read, we won't ask for as much information as we will for the overall application, but the pre-read allows coaches to work closely with us for us to say, yes, continue recruiting this athlete. I'm giving you a green light. And that is mostly based on your academic profile, what courses you're going to be taking in your final year of high school, and then some other pieces. The next slide breaks that down a little bit more of the pre-read into kind of 3 significant areas. So the pre-read is, you're in touch with the coach, you're having conversations, the coach is interested in you as a possible scholar athlete on their roster. So the coach's assessment will include your talent level, what position, what's the need of the team, what need will you fill, times if it's stopwatch sports, and kind of give us a rating of the impact level you will make on this team if we are able to enroll you. And then for the academic piece, we are looking for what courses were offered at your high school. Was it a standard national curriculum? Were there more advanced, challenging courses available? Did you take those courses? How well did you do? Are you in an A range or an A and B range? Are your grades getting lower as you get your sport becomes more intense? We want to make sure that students can handle the intensity of sport with their academics as well. There's also going to be conversations between a coach's assessment and the academic prep about scholarship, right? Are you eligible for a scholarship? Are you at that level? Some sports are full scholarship, meaning every athlete on the roster receives a full comprehensive scholarship. That's men's and women's basketball at Davidson. And then there are partial scholarships for other sports. But for men's and women's basketball, if we have a player that they bring to us, we know that that's going to be full scholarship. If not, let's say it's tennis, and this could be very Davidson specific, but let's say it's tennis or a sport that doesn't have full scholarships for every athlete, then we need to find out What's the family contribution? How much is coming from sport? And are there any other scholarships at the college that we can combine? So figuring out the funding sources well is going to be an important part of that conversation. Now, many schools are starting to require SAT and ACT again. There are a number that are still test optional. Most schools across the United States went test optional when COVID hit because of access to testing centers, wanting to make it more accessible for students with closures of testing centers, but also with the limitations. So we were test optional. Davidson continues to be. Many colleges are adding it. So then you need to know with your coach's assessment, in addition to your transcript, what else is needed? Is an SAT or ACT going to be required? And depending on what country, New Zealand and Australia, with English being the primary language, we're not going to require English language proficiency results, but for most other countries, we do as part of that kind of first assessment. What we're not asking for is going to be any essays or a letter of recommendations, any kind of short responses that we might require. So even if you pass the pre-read, and the coach gets the green light to continue recruiting you, that means that you're still going to have to fill out a full application, which will require more documents. Now, if you get a red light, that usually means that your academics are not meeting the academic bar of that institution. And that's us, admission, telling the coaches, you can no longer recruit this student because academically they're not going to be admissible. So the admission pre-read is really your move forward or you're not moving forward with that school.
Thank you, Kaye-Lani. That is awesome information, and it's so spot on in terms of looking at the admissions piece versus this athletic sport recruitment piece, because you have to remember these coaches at these universities are charged with winning championships. So their main objective is to get the best possible athlete that's going to help them win stuff, right? And so looking at the numbers again, it is important to kind of understand why some of these scholarships are offered in full capacity versus other sports not having a full capacity. And Kaye-Lani touched on this beautifully. So American football, we've got 85 full rides for American football. So that means your entire scholarship is covered. And then basketball is the other category where you get full rides. And this is specifically only at Division I schools, right? So looking at the left there, you see the men's sports scholarships. So ice hockey is up and coming, track and field, lacrosse. But so, for example, men's tennis does not, there's very few folks on our men's tennis team that get a full ride. So, for example, you guys might know John Isner, who played at the University of Georgia. He was actually not from Georgia. He was from North Carolina. And he didn't necessarily get a full ride, even though he was one of the best tennis players on the face of the planet. So my point is, do your research a little bit with this and understand which sports allots the full scholarships so that you are better prepared to know what you're going to be allotted, and also if you can stack some academic scholarships with that. So for men's sports, again, American football and basketball, the full rides, and this is because of NCAA Title IX that has those sports allotted or scholarships allotted there. And then for the women's sports, there's 4 sports that you can get a full ride at Division I schools. So that is basketball, gymnastics, volleyball, and tennis. So for example, everybody on my tennis team had a full ride, right? So I talked about it a little bit earlier about looking at the difference in numbers. So if the men's tennis team does not offer necessarily full rides, I mean, they can if they want to, but they split up scholarships. And the women's tennis team, everybody gets a full ride. That's 2 very different recruitment strategies. So for example, our men's tennis team has to really look maybe at in-state students a little bit more because in-state students cost them less. Where a true international student, you've got to be a phenomenal tennis player to be able to get on the team to then be allotted X amount of money. But for women's tennis, our women's tennis coach would just go out and recruit the best and they'll get a full ride. So understanding the other side of the table is just as important because we talked about finding the right fit, but it's also important to understand the recruitment policies and strategies that these coaches are following. So that's why it's important for students to just understand sometimes you might not get a full ride, but if you're looking at these specific sports that's highlighted here or bolded here, those are the ones that you can get a full ride in. And again, Australia, New Zealand, produces great tennis, golf, basketball, track and field. But go do your research to figure out which sport you will get a full ride in at which division. So Division 1 and Division 2 schools usually have sports scholarships. Division 3 schools doesn't offer sports scholarships, but they offer academic scholarships. So this is part of the piece where students and parents need to understand they need to research this journey. And this journey is kind of student managed and parent managed as well. Going into the next slide here, I'll start us off with navigating this recruitment dance, right? So when I came to play tennis in the US, I didn't have a digital presence, but nowadays that is actually kind of important. So our athletic department have an NIL division, and we have a social media division that helps these students manage their social media as they're here on campus. And to give you more context, at the University of Georgia, we're a large public research institution, so we have over 40,000 students on campus. But of that, we have about 500 students that are student athletes. And of those 500, we have about 45 that are true international student athletes, right? So your digital presence is going to help you navigate this US world. Our NIL department helps students understand how to navigate that space by capitalizing on what's available here in the US, as well as if you want to go pro, or, if you want to get other endorsements in other countries. That's why it's important to kind of have these digital presences. It's an important piece in this recruitment process. And then I'll hit on the other two here, and then I'm going to hand it over to Kaye-Lani for her. It's important for you guys to kind of hear the difference between the institutions, right? But yeah, so the personalized outreach, Kaye-Lani indicated earlier in the presentation about how important it is for you to be very strategic with your outreach, right? So we get thousands of emails per week from international students asking if they can get a sports scholarship. And I usually tell students to only reach out to the coaches or reach out to our athletic department if you have numbers or statistics, or you are better than somebody currently on our roster, right? So don't reach out to these schools if you don't have what it takes to currently be on the team. That's a waste of your time as well as the coach's time, right? Coaches will usually only reach back out to you if you have numbers better than anybody currently on their team. So be strategic with your outreach. Don't just email everybody. Email them what your numbers are, and then also tell the coaches that you've done your research and you figured out that this person in this position on the roster, you actually competed against them, or you might have beaten them, or you have better results than them. That's what you need to mention in the personal outreach. And then club versus school sport. It's important for these coaches to understand what your level of club involvement is and explain that in detail in your outreach, right? So make sure you give the coach enough information to make a decision on you. Don't just say, hey, I'm a pretty good swimmer at this specific club. Tell us what the club's results are and what they're producing. And the reason why that's important is, so for example, at the University of Georgia, we've produced over 100 Olympic athletes. And these athletes are coming from all over the world. So we know, or our coaches know, which clubs produce the best students most of the time. So this is just, again, from the University of Georgia's lens, but these are important pieces to consider as you're doing your outreach. So I'm going to hand it over to Kaye-Lani for her thoughts and her view from Davidson.
Similar in the sense, except we're smaller, right? We are smaller, so intentionality is a really big part of it. Kind of as Chenelle said, make sure you are being selective on the schools, the coaches you are emailing. You are going to get better results if you include more information that matches the school's profile in terms of the times of those swimmers or the times of those track athletes, or at the level of the basketball players who are currently on the roster, or if you're going to be at any showcase events where, kind of putting, here's where I'll be playing, where coaches or recruiters from these colleges and universities usually attend. I mean, our coaches will fly to Helsinki, Finland, they fly to London, they fly to Spain, they go to Australia, Sydney. Actually, our assistant basketball coach is Australian himself, which is why we've had such a great number of Australians on our women's team. But they will fly all around the world to watch you play. So part of it is getting their attention, and it's getting those video clips, it's having that digital presence, making sure you have the information. Otherwise, it's going to be a quick delete. Coaches don't have time to respond to every email, so really just making sure that it's quality over quantity in this case. The more time you take, the more likely you'll get a response if you were at that caliber, right? So being really honest with yourself, as we thought back in a few slides, like just being honest about this process, how highly competitive it is, and then also kind of targeting some of the schools or the sports that you think you might be able to align with based on that level and that talent on the team. And so I would say the same thing where the clubs, as Chenelle said, our coaches know where some of these players come from. Our field hockey coach has had a number of students come from the Netherlands and Germany, and often I see it's coming from some of the same clubs within the Netherlands. So you just build up I would say, a reputation. It's the club builds up a reputation, and then the university builds up a reputation. So it doesn't mean that because you're not on one of the high ascending clubs, if you are at that level of an athlete where the university would see that you're going to be competitive, or you are, as Chenelle said, faster than or better than someone on the current team, you could be the first from the club, right? So just because you're not on one of those clubs doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It's just that is often where coaches will start, because if they have a good history with that club of students who also are good scholars as well, they're going to continue to go back to those clubs. We do the same on the admission side outside of sport. I'm going to some of the same high schools today in China as I have in the past, because we've had some really great students enroll. So it's kind of just part of that process.
Yeah, and I'll start us off here. So we're going to do the same thing where we're giving you guys the UGA lens and the Davidson lens, but positioning yourself for success. Start thinking about like your recruitment brand, your social media presence, email etiquette. Coaches look at that. And not only coaches, but admissions representatives look at that as well. I'm going to share a story with you guys that actually will make good sense in terms of why social media and things are important, as well as character and all the other things, right? A couple of years ago, our women's tennis coach recruited a student from South America. The student was a phenomenal tennis player, and she was basically going to guarantee that we're going to win all the NCAA championships, right? So we worked really hard to yield the student. From an admissions lens, we kind of had a red flag on her just because she didn't really meet the academic criteria. We researched her social media, and, there was some questionable things that she's posted, right? So we look at all these things. And so ultimately, from an admissions perspective, we actually denied the student admission, but the athletic department basically determined that the student is a phenomenal player, so they're going to let her in. She was admitted for about 3 months and then dropped out, right? So literally dropped out, went back, moved to her home country. So all of a sudden what you have is an empty seat where a student could have filled that spot, and a coach is drastically looking for a spot filler on his team. So be cognizant of your brand, right? Be cognizant of your social media presence, and specifically that bottom one, their character does count. My women's tennis coach, for example, loves to recruit team players, right? He loves people with team playing personality types. And then my golf coach loves to recruit students from different countries. He doesn't want 2 students from the same country because he doesn't want them to kind of disassociate themselves from campus by just being the 2 of them. He wants students to actually plug into the campus environment. So it's important for you to understand that the coaches have personality types too, and they're looking for a specific fit as well. And so they're going to look at your recruitment brand, right? That social media brand. And then in terms of NCAA eligibility, start that process early. There's a very good international student NCAA handbook that you can utilize. Actually helped write some of the chapters in that book. So it is up to date. It's important for you to read that book because it has up-to-date policies and procedures that might have changed from years past. Yeah, recruitment brand, character, very important. Coaches look at that, especially from UGA's perspectives. Now I'm going to hand it off to Kaye-Lani.
Yeah, I would say in the end, you are representing the university. When you put that jersey on, you put that swim cap on, you are a representative of the university. So that's where the character piece comes in, and the social media, as Chenelle mentioned. We are competitive in our sports, but we're looking for team players. Our basketball coach she talks to us about those that when she watches them on the court, she's also watching how many passes do they play? How do they interact with their team before they get out on court? It only takes one athlete on a team sport to ruin the entire overall kind of team spirit, right? And so coaches are very cognizant of that this might be the star player, that blue chip player, but if that person isn't a team player, it might not be the best fit. At Davidson, character counts a lot. Part of our mission, we have an honor code where you get a lot of trust, the power of trust to take your exam self-proctored. There's a lot of trust in the relationships between professors and students and coaches and students, and honesty. We look for students who value integrity. In the application, you have a why Davidson, and my favorite is when an athlete writes more than just being an athlete at that school. It's about some of the academics, why they want this school, what it is they realized during their official visit that made them want to commit to this school. We have sent applications back to coaches for athletes because they were too short. We said, you know what? This is supposed to be a personal statement. It has a limit to words, and they filled out one paragraph. We need more effort, or we're going to see this as the effort they're going to bring to the classroom. Take that back to the student before we're going to admit them. And so we want to see that you know this place, and that you're excited about not just playing sport at the Division I level or at a high profile school, but you also understand that when you graduate and you finish your 4 years, very few go on to professional sports. What is your life going to be like after? And how is this university going to help you get there? So thinking about those pieces, but the recruitment brand and your social media presence is becoming more and more important because that is how you present yourself. And we would see that if you present yourself that way when you are in high school, you likely will continue to present yourself that way when you're representing this university.
Yeah, and we're in the last few slides here, so I appreciate you guys sitting with us. But I think this is an important slide to just kind of note the differences between our two schools. You have to start, if you apply with us in August when our applications open, we're on the Common App. To Kaye-Lani's point, student athletes, I get that they put a lot of work in their craft of sport, but they're very negligent when it comes to really submitting a competitive application, right? So I want our athletes to situate themselves in a better footing on the admissions or the application side as well. So it's not just all about sport, but if you can really articulate yourself in the admissions or application process, if you can articulate yourself well, then you're setting yourself up for success, right? So the application opens in August. For us, you need to submit 6 items. Of that, we require a SAT or a ACT. So if you do not submit an SAT or ACT, you are not going to be considered for admission, right? So that is a big difference with us and some of the other schools in the US. There's plenty of schools that's test optional. There's schools that's test required or test bias with scholarships, things like that. So it's important for you to narrow down which schools you want to apply to and what their policies or rules are when it comes to, do you have to submit a SAT or ACT test? And then the transition from the domestic or international status to your F1 visa status in the US, your immigration part plays a very big role as well. Before you get to the US, if your visa wasn't approved, you're not going to come. So knowing all these pipelines is very important, right? So if you're on an F1 visa, it means you're coming to the US on the non-intent to immigrate visa. You're telling the United States that you're just coming here for 4 years to study. And with that, you can, get your scholarship or in terms of academics or sports scholarships. But it is important for students to also understand that your visa status is also the thing that could limit you in the NIL realm. Currently, per U.S. immigration policy, if you're on an F1 visa, you cannot participate in NIL, right? So you can participate in NIL in your home country, other countries, just not on US soil, because that is the immigration status that you're in. They're working on changing the status, but we'll see how long that's going to take. Yeah, it is just important to understand these segments or spheres that you're going to have to navigate as you're going through this process. And I'll hand it over to Kaye-Lani.
And Chenelle, before you do that, can you just explain what NIL is? I know we're really bad in abbreviations, and how that's changed the landscape of athletics probably in the last 5 years.
NIL is the name, image, and likeness policy or process that a lot of students can make money off of, right? So, for example, if a student is the quarterback at UGA at our University of Georgia, that student's jersey sales, the student can now get a cut off of that. If a student is, let's say, their name, image, and likeness is replicated on a video game, that student can now get monetary awards for that. So our NIL department actually helps students negotiate these deals. So that's why your brand and your social media is so important coming in, because by the time you get here, our NIL department is going to look at that and basically say, hey, how do we need to change this to get you better deals, right? So yeah, money is involved here. So NIL is a big deal. It's growing exponentially. It's actually somewhat affecting the recruitment process, but we will get into that on another day. But it is important to kind of consider that in your process as well, because if you get, let's say, an academic scholarship and a portion of a sports scholarship, but the university that you're at is going to be able to get you better NIL deals, that means more money in your pocket, then that might swing your commitment to specific universities. So yeah, great point there, Samantha. Yeah, and Kaye-Lani, I'm going to hand it over to you because I think it's important for students to kind of see the differences here.
Yep. And I would say when Chenelle and I played in college, that was not part of the equation. And so that has definitely changed the landscape of playing athletics in higher education within college and university. Kind of similar to what we talked about before with, applying and thinking about your timeline. So getting in touch with the coaches, because you're going to apply to those specific schools that you have a chance to play. Normally, you'll be making a verbal commitment prior to the application opening. So you'll be making a verbal commitment saying, I'm playing, I'm committing to this school. There's also signing periods. So you're making a commitment to a school before you start that full application, the common application, as Chenelle mentioned. We're both on the common application. And then when you select your school, that the supplements will populate. So then you'll know if there are additional essays or additional information you have to submit. For example, at Davidson, Chenelle and I are from two very different schools when it comes to size. We require a peer recommendation, a recommendation letter from a friend, someone who knows you well, maybe a teammate, because we want to know who you are as a friend, just not as a student in the classroom. We very much build our community based on how students treat people their own age. Are you a good friend? Do you show up? Are you respectful? We talk a lot about that in committee. So thinking about the application, but knowing that prior to that kind of 12 to 18 month timeline, you're going to be having the conversations with coaches. You will already have gotten that green light. You will then be moving forward with the application. So at the point of starting the full application in the US, as we call the common application, many schools in the US accept this. It's a platform online. You will already know that this school it's a pretty much a yes, unless your grades totally go downhill, right? There are ways that colleges can say, your final year of academics, you dropped significantly academically, and you are no longer a fit for our school. So you need to keep those grades up throughout. And then the test, I saw a question about SAT, ACT. This is going to vary by school, and also NCAA requirements as schools start to require them again. As of now, you don't need to be submitting those as part of the assessment. But then the transition, right? So yes, you can't come into the US on a tourist visa. You have to get that document from the International Student Support Office, the F1 visa. And basically that officer who issues the document for you to get the F1 visa is saying, we believe this student is in good academic standing. So we have to sign off on that before you go and interview for your visa. And that is all part of the application process. But really being in touch with the coaches, being open to being in touch with the admission officers as well to make sure you have everything in on time. I would say the big thing here too, when it gets to the application part, meet deadlines. That is also something that shows that you can handle being a scholar athlete is that you're meeting deadlines, you're organized. All of these things matters. As much as Chenelle said, we look at your emails, we look at your tone, how you write emails. Same thing about meeting deadlines. Everything kind of goes into the process.
Yeah, no, deadlines are so important. We have so many students after a deadline that'll be like, hey, can you open the portal real quick and submit some transcripts? Like, no, we can't. We had 53,000 students do this on time. Why would we shift these timelines? So it is important for you to follow the timelines and deadlines. Very important, very different for a lot of these schools. And going into this last slide, I think this is where I hand it back off to Samantha.
So, hi, everyone. I think one of the things that becomes really important is absolutely creating that relationship with the coach. The way we've designed today's session is we're going to give this information all to you in time chunks and information chunks. But one of the things that before Kaye-Lani talks about this exciting story, just to Kaye-Lani and Chenelle a little bit, why their roles are so important is that for the NCAA in particular, there are periods when coaches are allowed to talk to you. And when they're not allowed to talk to you directly. And for Australia, for instance, that tends to be the middle of year 11. So again, building the relationship with someone like Kaye-Lani or Chenelle becomes critical because they can fill a lot of those gaps in regards to, well, why isn't the coach getting back to me? Now, you should know where those timelines are, and we're going to teach you with our follow-up sessions. But before you sort of go into this wonderful story, talk about how important that relationship is with an international admissions office, because they really exist for the benefit of international students, and how you can assist in that process as well.
Absolutely. You want to be in touch with the international office. At Davidson, we have some special programming, such as a host family program. We match you with a local host family, an American family. We can do that because we're 2,000 students. It's nice to present with Chenelle because we're very different schools in terms of size and also athletic competitiveness, right? Like, I am really excited because we have our first WNBA draft. At Chenelle and at University of Georgia, they've had many students go on into the NBA, WNBA, Olympics. We've had about 3 students go into the Olympics, but we're both Division I, right? So that is being realistic with your level of talent and what types of schools that you are going to look to be recruited. The Division I, there's a range of athletic talent that you'll find among Division I schools. So yes, we're so excited about Charlize, our first ever in the history of the board at Davidson women's basketball. Do we have someone who was picked, drafted to the WNBA? Second player after Steph Curry. So Steph Curry was our first draft, and now we have our Australian. So that's pretty exciting and great news from Davidson. I also will mention, going back to Samantha's point, the International Student Office will give you authorization to work on campus, to work during summers. You want to get a really great internship, and your coaches said, yes, you can do this internship in London or back in Sydney or back in Auckland, right? You have this awesome opportunity. If it's in the US, you have to get work authorization. If you're going back to, work in another country, you don't need that authorization through your F1 visa. But if you want to work in the United States after you graduate, you do have a period in which you can work legally in the United States, but you have to get that authorization through the International Students Office. So you want to make sure you do have a good relationship with them. There's often a handoff period from admissions to the International Student Engagement Office or International Student Services, where you'll start the process for obtaining the document you need to get your F1 visa.
Yeah, and I can chime in real quick, just related to how you as a student and parents can connect with these universities, especially if you feel like the coaches are not getting back to you. Right. So again, the coaches are busy, right? They're either coaching, traveling, or recruiting, or trying to win championships. So their time is limited, and they have certain segments of the year that they're allowed to talk to students. So they're very strategic with who they're going to talk to during that period. But if you're not on a coach's radar, or if you're genuinely interested in a very specific school, you can contact the admissions offices directly, because we're separate entities from the athletic department. So for example, you can email me right now and say, hey, I'm interested in the following programs at your school. Anything academic related or admissions related, we can answer. And we don't have a timeline or a time frame allotted to us where we can only answer your questions in certain times of the year. But For us, it's open-ended. When it comes to the aspect of like talking to coaches about specific scholarship allotment, that's where you're going to have to work with the coaches and the athletic departments, right? Because remember, scholarships are only year-long contracts, right? So you will have to renegotiate your contract with your coach every year to determine, did you do well that year? Did you do okay? Are you thinking of transferring out? The transfer portal is a whole nother beast. But it is important for you to understand that you can develop or start these relationships with specific schools and their admissions offices. There are folks like me and Kaye-Lani specifically placed in these offices to help families navigate these waters of just how do we do this, and how it's so different from one school to the next that it is important for you to start early outreach.
A couple of the questions are related to academics. I would say Education USA officers are amazing resources, as are the Education USA centers for talking about applying to the United States. That's part of their role, is providing programming, but also advising for applying to the United States and talking about your academic profile. And that could be a great start. Samantha, over to you on kind of what comes next, right? This was the first session of 3. We wanted to break it down because it's a lot of information throughout the entire process. We didn't want to give it to you all in one because it's overwhelming and a lot of details to remember. So we're breaking this into 3 sessions for you. Great idea by Samantha Jackson. So we're really happy to be here, and we'll see you for a second session.
And Kaye-Lani may need to drop off the call because she's got to go to a school visit. So Kaye-Lani, if you do need to leave, thank you so much for being here. It's been absolutely amazing. And Chenelle, if you can talk a little bit more about what's on the screen in regards to the sessions moving forward, and that we are going to move through a Q&A period as well.
Yeah. So we are done with session 1, you guys. Well done. I'm glad you guys tuned in. It is an important piece to kind of sit through and just understand all the components related to it. And if you feel like you're getting absolutely overwhelmed with it, that's normal. It is a lot, and it is a lot to digest, but you have folks in the Education USA offices and in my offices and all these university offices where we can help out. So session 1 is covered. Going into session 2, we're going to talk about the scholarship tiers. So the difference between those full and partial scholarships, advanced strategies related to maybe stacking scholarships. And then session 3 is going to be the NCAA divisions and navigating the Eligibility Center. So each of these sessions do build on each other. And if you have specific questions, please feel free to fire away with those questions, because as we're working our way through the data points or the information pieces, you might have a question. You're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea how this would work. Or like Samantha indicated, the NIL piece. I know we work through stuff real fast, but it is important for you to kind of start thinking about the process and think about the questions that you want to ask as you're navigating yourself through these processes. So yeah, and that's it for me, unless I need to add more, Samantha.
No, that's fantastic, Chenelle. And I think one of the reasons that we want to be with you today, and I've brought the whole team on screen, is that we all have different experiences that we can also bring and help you with. So one of the things that really is important to know by the work of the Department of State, the US Consulate and the embassies in your respective countries, and by Education USA teams like us, we, are all provided a wage to provide a free service to all of our families, students and schools that we support. So I have brought them up on screen. I'm an Australian, and I've done all my undergrad and my master's in the US. I was also a Division I NCAA golfer. I just want you to sort of introduce to Katie and Cora, and even Sean can bring himself on screen, because we all bring different perspectives on how we can help and support. We'll also be sharing a whole lot of other resources to help you through the process. So if you don't live in Melbourne and you didn't come to our session with Stephanie Ratcliffe about 6 weeks ago, we have added that to our YouTube channel. Stephanie Ratcliffe went to Harvard University, then went to University of Georgia as a hammer thrower. And then she did a qualifying throw when she was at UGA, and she qualified for the Australian Olympic team for hammer throw. And she is quite amazing because she's won the NCAA championship twice, which is unbelievable. So, we have recordings and sessions that you'll be able to access and review. And sometimes it's about reviewing the information again. So we'll have this recording uploaded soon, and you can review it and absorb the information. And once you absorb it, the information becomes a whole lot easier and then becomes a whole lot more understandable. But Katie, over to you just to talk to the group.
Thank you, Samantha, and big kudos to you for bringing us all together today. Just tuning in from Auckland, New Zealand, where both Sean and I are based. So hello to any Kiwis on the call today. We are getting back up to speed with all things Education USA and offering support services to our students, schools, and wider communities. We know that New Zealand is also a top 10 center of student athletes into the NCAA consistently, and that's just the NCAA. So not even looking at community colleges and NAIA programs as well. We are really eager to help support as best as we can along these journeys. We are based here at the US Consulate in Auckland. We look after the whole of New Zealand from our office here. Please follow us on the US Embassy social media for the best place to get information, and we'll make sure that we pop in our email into this chat as well for continued engagement. Shall we go ahead into some questions? I know that we've got several that have been submitted to us, and I know that there's been also a few that were submitted ahead of time as well. I think there's a few questions around name, image, and likeness, and I wonder if we could go a little bit more into detail on that. Chenelle, one of the questions that was asked is, at what stage in the process do you look at socials? Do we wait for coaches to look us up, or do we provide profiles to them ahead of time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's always best to provide profiles ahead of time, right? Because if you're well prepared, a coach likes that. That's less work for them on their tail end, right? So always think about this whole process from the lens of how can I help this coach not say no to me, right? You have to have your stuff in line, and basically specifically related to like NIL pieces, they're going to look at your social media. They're going to then connect you with the NIL department to then say, this person either has no social media, which is fine. But the problem NIL sometimes runs into is if a student had a social media brand per se that's out there that's not necessarily palpable for sponsors, right? So you will find here locally in Athens, if your football is huge here, and if you are a football player and you have a little bit of a bad history with, just social media stuff and things you've posted, you might lose contracts or folks that will not align with your views in terms of sponsorship or NIL deals. So it is important for you to kind of start that process early on. Reach out to the coaches. And the other thing that I usually tell students and athletes and parents is start following the coaches, specifically the sports social media page. Check out their Instagram, check out their social media so that you can get the vibe of what they do. And does your vibe match? Right? Because if your vibe doesn't match with that social media, what they're putting out there, then it might not be a good fit. So it is one way for students to kind of get a feel of not just the institution, but also what does these coaches put out there, right? Like what does their social media look like and how will you align with that? So yes, start that process early. Yeah, and if you have bad social media, just quit it, don't do it, and maybe start a fresh account. But yes, my best piece of advice is to, always share things that'll help the coaches understand your dynamic.
And then a semi-related question to that was if a student needs to factor in a specific type of visa for sport with an NIL requirement.
Yeah. So if you are on an F1 visa, and I was on this visa category myself, it is the non-intent to immigrate visa. So you're telling the US government that you are not immigrating. You are just coming to study temporarily. And with that, your visa classification means that you're studying. So you're only a student. So on that F1 visa classification, you can also only work 20 hours a week on a campus. If you work more than that, then you break the rules of what your immigration status is or immigration contract is with the university. And so this is new waters for the immigration side of what we're seeing, right? So there are plenty of international students on their F1 visa that will get NIL deals in other countries or in their home country, right? Because the athletic department's social media division really promoted the student, and the student became, let's say, a global phenomenon. And so now everybody wants to sponsor the student. They will look at your immigration status first before they can sign contracts or deals with you. And then, like I said, if you're on that F1 visa, know that you can do the NIL deals in foreign countries or in your home country. But on that status, you cannot do an NIL deal currently in the US.
That's a good answer. Thank you. I'm seeing a couple of really good questions about visibility as a student athlete and thinking ahead in that long game. What competitions should you be part of? I see some specific questions about water polo, but I really think this applies across the board. Do you need to be putting yourself in training camps and competitions just within your home country? Do you need to be thinking broader in your region? Do you actually need to travel to the US in order to be seen by coaches in specific sports? So maybe you can shed a little bit more light on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. If you're playing a sport where the numbers tells your story, then you don't have to travel as much. So for example, in tennis, we have this UTR ranking. Back in the day, when I played, we didn't have a UTR. We just had a South African national ranking and an International Tennis Federation ranking. So I went and played some ITFs, but I didn't have a UTR. So the coaches recruit based on some of these rankings. And now with this new UTR ranking system, our coaches don't actually have to travel all over the world because it's so accurate, right? So the UTR, it's literally 100% accurate. So that means if you tell a coach here, let's say at the University of Georgia, that you're a 14 UTR, then my men's coach will bend over backwards to try and get you, right? But if you're, let's say, a 12 UTR, probably not going to get anything here with us. Then you can look at like D2 schools or things like that. So the visibility piece differs from the sports. So if you have a sport that's very, very individual and you've got specific numbers that you can share, that's going to have a different visibility connotation than, let's say, a subjective sport, let's say soccer, right? How do you know that the one goalie is better than the other goalie? That's where the coaches will travel, and they will go and see, where are you participating? How serious are you about participating? So showing up at the correct tournaments or, club things is important, especially if the coaches are going to be there. And then, Kaye, you're hitting on a very interesting subject too, because it is very popular for some of these students to now come to the US and do summer camps. So that's one way for you to, number one, get a taste of the campus that you might be interested in. And number two, you might be able to see the coach that might be coaching you. And number three, it gives you a nice soft landing of the cultural acclimation that you're going to experience. The US is large. And let me tell you, when I started at Mississippi State, it was quite a culture shock, right? So it would have been really nice if I had gone earlier in the summer or, earlier in my career and just go and visit and just maybe do a summer camp. That's one way for you to get visible as well. So if you're in a subjective sport, the answer is you need to show up in the right sphere. So if you're telling a coach that you're selected for the Olympic Committee, or you're playing on a national team, that's great, right? But for tennis, for example, if it's very numbers driven, or swimming, your numbers will tell the story. Like, my coach doesn't need to fly to Australia to figure out if your forehand's better than somebody on our current team. If your UTR is better, then we're going to take you. I hope that sheds some light on that.
Definitely. Thank you. I see another question that is specific to a sport, but I think it's on a really good bridge topic about amateurism as well, and how that might impact your overall eligibility. And I do think that we will delve into this topic a bit further on a future session. But since you're here now, I think it's a good idea to also answer it. So how should we be thinking about amateurism early in the process? And if we have opportunities to play at sort of a semi-pro level within our home countries, what does that look like for us? And what should we be thinking about?
It's a great question. And this is what I do a lot, right? I sit with these coaches and we recruit these students from all over the world, and all of them want to go pro, right? Because they're good. They're really good. They're number one in their country, number two in their country. They should go pro. And then my coaches do a very good job of helping the student understand the realm or the scope of their sport. So I highly suggest for student athletes to take the scholarship route or the USA College route first. Go and win NCAAs, then go pro. Right? Because if you don't win NCAAs, like you're talking about the US here, you have 4,000 universities. So you're going to compete against the world's best athletes, possibly, right? So if you're not winning NCAAs, then how do you think you're going to make it pro, right? So the other point of this is where we usually encourage students to kind of look at, that amateurism piece where you kind of decide, well, do I want to go play and compete in a couple of tournaments, make some money, and then take a sports scholarship? I highly advise kind of against that. I definitely tell students, you want to look at the college route first, and here's the reason why. If you get a good full ride scholarship somewhere, you have 4 years of free coaching, free tournaments, free practices, free sponsorship. I mean, we're sponsored by Nike. Whatever you want, we're going to get for you. Our coaches, so for example, for tennis, in the spring break, May and summer, some of these students would want to go and play some professional tennis tournaments. We'll go do that for you. So do change your thinking a little bit. You don't have to go pro as young as you are. Use these 4 years to get a degree, right? And if you're really good, you can drop out and then go pro, right? That's okay. But get that degree. See how you can build your game in 4 years, win the NCAAs, then that's going to set you up for success, hopefully, in the future.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting advice. Thank you. Any other thoughts about participating, not exactly at the pro level, but how do we know if playing sort of sub-pro, semi-pro in our countries is going to be a red flag for us with the NCAA? Is that something that we can check with the NCAA amateurism office ahead of time?
Yes. Yeah, you definitely want to reach out to them ahead of time. And like I said, policies and procedures change. I have been in this system for, over 20 years now. I've lived it. I've seen it change. So it is important for you as a student athlete to understand that you need to know the rules and you need to play by them. So for your specific sport, you can reach out to NCAAs at any time and just say, hey, I'm interested in this. I might make some money. I don't know. What would you guys advise I do in my scenario? So definitely reach out to them directly to get the most accurate and up-to-date information.
Yeah, that's good advice. So I see a follow-up question on that issue itself, but yeah, NCAA has an amateurism office, and all they do is answer queries like this one. So best to go straight to the source on that.
Yeah.
I've got a question about injuries and how that might impact a season or even beyond a season.
Yeah. So, it's interesting when you look at a college athlete's journey. I've had plenty of athletes that became redshirt freshmen, or, they would redshirt somewhere in their season. So they get an extra semester or an extra year, depending on what the coach signed off on. So, when I played college tennis, one of my doubles partner had to have surgery on her wrist. So she literally arrived. She was from Sweden. She arrived there the same time I did, which was in January. We talked about this where it's a little different for US students. They show up in the fall or in August. I was a January start because South Africa, our high schools graduate in December. So I showed up in January. She was literally there. We practiced for 2 weeks and then she had to have surgery. So she got redshirted, right? So that redshirt category is different for a lot of sports. So so she had surgery, got it corrected, but she still continued her academics there and she was still part of the team. She showed up for the same tournaments and traveled with us. She just didn't play. So she got added an extra semester or extra year on her scholarship journey. So injuries, I see this a lot. Students will get injured and go home, right? And I get that you want to go home because you're injured, you want to be with family and so forth. But I have seen way too many students drop out and not take that red shirt classification or category, and then they don't get a scholarship offer the following year or the year after. So be very careful or work with your coaches directly to really plan, if you have an injury, don't just kind of cover it up. Really discuss it with your coaches because they'll help you navigate this really well. Like I said, I've seen too many people not really tell the truth to their coaches and they go home and then they have surgery at home. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, the coaches didn't really know. So you might lose your scholarship at the end of that year. So this is the part of finding the right fit, making sure you and the coach get along really well because you're going to be with this person for the next 4 years. So yeah, great question.
Great. And that's a really good segue because I do have a few other questions about fit. So both as an athlete, how do you know if you are in the realm for being recruited for a specific level in your sport? Academically, how do we know if we're looking at the right fit universities for us? And I might actually pull in Education USA to address a couple of these. Samantha or Cora, would you like to talk a little bit about academic fit at institutions and maybe some of the GPA questions that we're getting as well?
Go, Cora.
Yeah, so we had seen some questions about how do we know what the academic fit is, or questions around ATAR or GPAs. And one, just before I do answer those questions, I will do a quick introduction. I work with Samantha in Australia. You can hear my accent. I am American, so I am from North Carolina. I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Go Tar Heels. And I did my master's degrees in Australia, so I have a good understanding of the academic systems both in the US and in Australia. So when it comes to fit, both academically and for sport, it is kind of what works best for you. And it can be the question of, are you looking for kind of the most academically rigorous university and you want to be able to play a sport there, or are you looking at the place that is the most rigorous for that sport and you want to get a good education there? So again, that all just depends on what works best for your particular circumstances. And in terms of, I was just typing a question too about understanding the landscape in Australia, because there are obviously different courses, and the way the systems work in each state and territory in Australia is different. The U.S. Admissions understands that, and your school in Australia is providing that information about a school profile, giving the context of your school in Australia, and then your academic transcript, they're providing the context, because the grading rubric in Australia and in each school might be different, but your school is providing the context of how they provide the grades. They should not be translating it into a GPA, but the school in the US understands what that means. And Chenelle, if you want to speak a bit more on that in terms of what that means of, a lot of students are asking, how do I convert my grades or an ATAR into a GPA? That is not what you need to do. The university. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
That's
don't do it. Don't waste your time on that. We'll do it. That's my job. Yeah, no, there are so many curriculums out there, you guys. There's IB curriculums and South African standard national curriculums, Chinese curriculums, Indian curriculums. So we look at all these curriculums and then we see how you challenge yourself within that academic environment. So we're going to look at your core courses that you took or your most academic courses to then recalculate a GPA for you. So what does this mean? This means if I came from South Africa and I had a transcript that was, let's say I had an interest in basket weaving. Well, here at the University of Georgia, we don't have basket weaving as a subject. So you're not going to be able to transfer that your credit into that major, or have the faculty the faculty admissions committee in that specific department say, oh yeah. So it's important for you to look at your academic courses. So don't worry about that conversion. We will do it for you. You just send us your high school transcripts and we will populate a GPA for you. And then to touch base on the aspect of like, how do you find this right fit? I think it's important for you as a student athlete to really think about what do you want to study first, right? So you're going to be a student athlete. Knowing what you want to study is going to help you make some decisions. So different schools have specialized in different things. For us, journalism, business, or whatever the categories are, we're strong in those. But if you want to study industrial engineering, we're not a good fit for you. So in other words, don't come and play tennis at our school, but you're interested in industrial engineering. That's not a good fit. So my best piece of advice is narrow your school, pick about 20 schools, right? 20 schools, and pick the states that you want to be in. Do you want to be in Texas? Do you want to be in New York? Do you want to be where it's warm? Do you want to be where it's cold? And pick about 5 schools in that state, and then hone in on, do they have your major? And then look and say, oh, do they have, your sporting program where you can grow, right? So you don't want to go to a sporting program where you're just, kind of not growing or becoming stagnant. So yeah, narrow down to about 20 and then narrow down to 5 schools and make sure they have your major and your sport where you can grow.
And then of course there's that athletic fit piece as well. So knowing if you are in the trajectory to be competitive on that team, to be seen and recruited by a coach or not. And of course this will vary depending on the sport that you're playing and participating in. But do you have any other thoughts on that, how to determine your athletic fit for a team division?
Yeah, athletic fit is very important. There's actually a lot of studies that we're doing right now. I'm actually on a research committee. So for example, in tennis, you can use UTR to really determine where you are, right? So you have Jannik Sinner, that's the best player in the world. He's like a 16 UTR. And then there's me, who's like a 9, right? I'm not up there. But knowing my space is important. Where using these UTRs in reverse is the new research. So in other words, you can look at college programs and see which coaches move the UTR of the student athlete up in increments of 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So in other words, you can look at programs and see who is producing Olympic sport athletes. And if that's your fit, if you're an elite Olympic athlete, then you need to look at the programs where they're pumping out professional athletes or Olympians, right? And if you're not in that space, let's say you're, where I'm at, then you need to look at schools and kind of look at the rosters. And then also look at the coaches too. A red flag for me a lot of times is if the coaches move a lot, right? If a coach has been there for 10 or 20 years, that's great. That means they've got depth, longevity, all those things. But we've seen some stats and data on students wanting to follow some coaches or signing a scholarship with a specific coach. They've only been there for a year or 2, and then the coach leaves, and all of a sudden the student's like, well, I came here for the coach, not for the academics. Now I'm going to drop out and get into the transfer portal. So yeah, finding the right athletic fit is a little bit more of a research project for you, but you're already in it. You know who's the best in the game, and you know which coaches produce the best ones. And if you don't, just fine-tune your craft a little bit. You'll figure it out as you get there. But that's how you're going to find the right athletic fit as well.
Yeah, I really wanted to echo your point there on looking at the current rosters for the teams that you're interested in. I think that can be a good way. Oftentimes, those rosters include some pretty clear stats about players on those teams, so you can see where you stack up against their current roster. Knowing as well that they also put information there, like if they are a freshman on the team versus if they're in their last year, if they're a senior, so you can kind of see the difference in that athletic ability and think about your own growth and trajectory as well, and where you fit into that mix. Also talk to your current coach or people or mentors who are helping you on your journey, and that might help shape where they think you are. Also, I think as you start this recruitment process and reaching out to institutions, talking with coaches, they will let you know if you are in the right realm or if you need to be thinking about something else. So that I do think that sort of becomes a bit more natural as part of the process as well. We've got a few more questions and only a few minutes left, but I do see one that came up that I wanted to make sure that we addressed, and that was about sort of the structure of these sports scholarships and the point that they may be for 1 year contract at a time, so that reapplication process. Do you mind if we touch on that a little bit more, Chenelle?
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I didn't know this. When I came over on my tennis scholarship, I had no idea that at the end of my first year, my coach and I were going to sit down and talk about my progress, right? And so very important to keep in mind. So this is, again, coming back to that aspect of really having a relationship with the coach and making sure it's the right fit. Yeah, your scholarships are year-long contracts, and it's not like a full reapplication. It's literally just saying you're continuing the contract if the coach approves, right? So, but if you're a menace on the team, you have horrible grades, and you're not showing up for practices, you're not going to get that scholarship that next year, right? So again, these coaches are driven and tasked with, they have to win championships. So if they're going to get rid of you because there's somebody else better around the corner, yeah, they're going to look at that. So my point with this is, really understand the relationship piece that you're going to climb into here as a student athlete, and know that your coach is going to be your biggest supporter in this process. I have seen very few times where a scholarship was revoked. Very few times. I've been here for 15 years, but it does happen, right? And then, you brought up a good point in terms of looking at the rosters and seeing how many students are graduating, right? Like right now, our women's tennis team are graduating 4 seniors. That's like half the team, right? So all of a sudden, our coach is going to be recruiting quite actively to get 4 spots filled. So do your research, figure out the coach's vibe, figure out the team's vibe by following their social media. But yeah, it is important for you to understand that these contracts are year-long, and that's okay. You just need to know that. And as you go into the year, you want to continue your relationship with the coach and express that you want to grow and help the program grow.
Excellent. Thank you. And for the sake of time, I know that we can get in one more question here. And there's a great one that's come up about rankings when you're looking at U.S. institutions. And I might, again, pull in my friends from Education USA to talk a little bit more about rankings and how to know with all the thousands of U.S. institutions that you're looking at ones that are a best fit for you academically and thinking about your future beyond education as well. Samantha, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I think it's really interesting when rankings are in the marketplace. There is a whole lot of private companies that have put those in the marketplace because official rankings don't really exist. So in regards to rankings, I would say be really careful if you are using rankings to make your decisions. And you also need to be very familiar with what rankings are also ranking, pardon the pun. What are they measuring? if you're looking at a programmatic ranking, as in, you know, this electrical engineering program versus this electrical engineering program, maybe that ranking is better based because it's what you're going to study. So I think rankings can also be helpful. They can give you a gauge of where that, you know, US college in particular fits. But if you're going to let that drive your decision of where you go to school, then I think that can be fraught with danger, because it really is about, you know, is it a big school? Is it a small school? Will I thrive in those environments? I think there's a really interesting question that has come up, and we're not going to have time for it today, but it's about that, and it's probably a closing question a little bit for Chenelle. It's about the experience that you're going to look into. You're really, let's be honest, in Australia and New Zealand, we are huge sporting nations. We have great sporting pathways, but the US really does it at a level that our countries really can't compete in, because, you know, you'd be doing your sport and your schooling at a university on separate train tracks, which I think is the best illustration that I use, opposed to being on the same train track and being supported in both. So a coach is obviously very focused on their sport. You know, they want to win, but in the end, they need their players to graduate. They are answerable to their athletic department. They are answerable to their vice chancellors. They need students to graduate, and that's also their mission. So to be able to then exceed in those elements becomes really important. And you need to become familiar as, do I like, you know, Athens, Georgia? Is that going to be really good? Is the heat good? I hate snow. It might be perfect for me. The size is great. I want a bigger institution. I want to be immersed in what that sort of that college town that University of Georgia is. Or I've lived up in the, you know, I've lived out of Auckland. I've lived in kind of a regional environment. I want to be in an urban environment. So again, you need to answer those real questions that are going to shape where you go. So I would say be really careful with rankings. Yes, they can be helpful, but yes, they can be really disruptive as well.
So good. Thank you. Wow, we've just finished 90 minutes. So thank you everyone who still is on the call with us. Truly sorry if we didn't quite get to your questions today, but I do hope that you stay in touch with us and you have our contact details there for reaching out. I do hope you also take a look at some of our past videos available on our shared YouTube channel. And please don't forget, we have some exciting 2 more sessions coming up within the next couple of months. So our next session will be on scholarship tiers, so full versus partial. And then our 3rd session will actually be going into a high level of detail about NCAA and navigating the Eligibility Center. So great information coming your way soon. Thanks again to, I'm going to actually pass it over to Samantha and just say thanks again to you in particular, because you really got us all together today, and this is your vision. So thank you for letting us be along your journey for us. But back to you, Samantha.
No worries. Thanks so much, Katie. Look, we really appreciate you being with us online. To Chenelle and Kaye-Lani, I know they are so informative and they're so willing to share. And this is just session 1. So those next sessions will be in July. We will send an after event email to everyone that attended today. We will share some additional resources with you. On behalf of us all, Chenelle, thank you for joining us this evening. I know Kaye-Lani's gone, but thank you for joining us from China. Good morning, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. And we look forward to engaging and supporting you on your journey. Thanks, everyone.